Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and David Bartky here. It is Thursday, June the 1st, 2017. David, it's hard to believe we're in June already. I'm still trying to figure out how to sign my checks from January.
I know, right? The year is really flying by. It's amazing.
It is amazing. But on the other hand, it has been a remarkable year. Of course, I began the year continuing my series with Joel Elston as my co-host. He had to bow out gracefully because of the change in his status, where he is now flying immensely high, running his new clinic in the Richmond, Virginia area, and he's got his 2 new foster kids, so he's got all kinds of wonderful things going on. And that made room for you to come into the picture, so I'm very blessed and grateful to have you with me.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm at a very high vibration today in general, and that's always nice, right?
Well, we're going to then try to capture you without the vibration knocking out the electrical equipment, so that'll be a good thing, you know?
Okay.
And before the show, like Joel and I used to do, you and I talked about what we want as a topic this week, and we decided to kind of go to the gurus, the experts. So you suggested the idea of talking about some Abraham Hicks quotes, which I really like. And I brought up, they're just wonderful. And then I brought up the Mike Dooley Notes from the Universe, and I was able to turn you on to them, so that's really cool. The quote that I wanted to start with, I'll start with my quote, and then you can bring in your quote, and we'll see how close. These things often come very close to each other anyway because of the way they're written. But here's the one that I got today from Mike Dooley. Now, we're recording this actually a week before the show is airing, so if you take notes of the universe, you'll understand why it is. This isn't matching your note today. But the note I got today said, "The time has come, the stage is set, nothing else has to happen. Immortality is assured, your thoughts are like laser beams, your feelings are like kryptonite. Neither time nor space nor that which they contain will ever be the same. Your friends are in awe, your foes are backing off, you've become untouchable. You cannot fail. The universe." They always sign the universe at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would call, that's a serious dose of self-confidence going on there.
Mm-hmm. And a serious belief in law of attraction.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, Mike doesn't hold any bars when it comes to writing his stuff. And
can you repeat the line about laser? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, your thoughts are like laser beams, he says, and your feelings are like kryptonite.
So what do you think he meant by that?
Your thoughts are like laser beams? Oh, I think that's all about the focusing. Because one thing we all know as human beings, and science now verifies this, it's impossible for us not to focus on something. Mm-hmm. As long as we're conscious and awake, we're focusing on something. And in the process of focusing, our thoughts direct us in terms of what we're going to focus on. So focusing is all about focusing. It's about making clear one particular thing that you're paying attention to. And that's very much equivalent to the idea of a laser beam. So he's basically saying every time you focus on something and have some kind of thought associated with it, you're generating a laser beam focusing on that specific thing.
Yes, and I think from a law of attraction point of view, to me, that also meant, like, when you focus on something and lasering in on something, you're taking on that vibration.
Yes. Well, that's vibration's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because vibration's a key portion of what Abraham Hicks teaches. It's not something that was really brought up in The Secret quite as much. And it's one of those things that's kind of nebulous. Like, what the heck is a vibration, you know?
But a vibration really is just how you're feeling about something. So, like, you could be, like, in a low vibration or a high vibration. It just depends on how you're thinking about it. And you can tell where your vibration is at by how you're feeling. Like, if you're thinking about something and it makes you feel good and excited, then you're at a higher vibration. And if you're thinking about something that makes you feel bad or sad or more down, then you're putting yourself at a lower vibration. So, like, when he was saying that laser beam, to me that meant it's so important what we focus on, because what we focus on, we're taking on that vibration, and then that's the vibration that we're putting out and setting ourselves up with.
Right, because if this whole concept of thoughts become things, of we are attracting what it is we focus on, or what is like, more precisely, what is like to what we focus on, what is similar to what we focus on, then that concept of vibration becomes a little bit more meaningful. And in fact, actually, science does recognize vibrations of the kind that we're talking about. Like, for instance, there are thought vibrations. They can measure them. Mm-hmm. They can measure how fast your brain is acting, whether you're experiencing alpha waves or beta waves or gamma waves or delta waves.
Yes, and also what we're focusing on causes us to focus on other thoughts that match that as well. So it kind of grows from there. You know, like a lot of times people will just recite like all this drama they had. Oh, this bad thing happened, and this bad thing happened, this bad thing happened. Because they're just in this spiral of attracting bad things because they're so focused on it. And thoughts are the same way. Like, you could think like, ooh, what if that happens to me? And then like, it kind of gets you in this mode, and then you're like, ooh, that's right. And, ooh, something else could happen, and then something else can happen. So it's always so important to be aware as possible of what we're focusing on.
One of the things that Joel and I did over the last year is we both gave up watching the news.
Good idea.
Oh, because the news is so full of negativity, as you know.
Well, talking about bringing you to a low vibration.
That's right. About as low as you want to get. But about the only way you could get, there is actually a way to get lower, I found. Well, there are two ways that I found. One is to focus on political news, because that's like the worst of all possible worlds.
Right, yes.
And the other is to focus on popular entertainment. Have you ever noticed that? Like the most popular movies and the most popular TV, it's this heavy, heavy drama, and somebody's about to die, and somebody's about to be murdered and killed or raped, or all this other stuff going on. And it's like, this is great entertainment that we're doing to our subconscious minds,
I know, that's why I guess I'm aging myself here, but that's why, like, I miss some of the older TV shows that were just more innocent and just more fun, because you're right, nowadays, most of the shows are about death and violence and betrayal and things like that, and it's just like, no, I'm going to stay away from those vibrations.
So I have to ask you, what were your favorite TV shows from a bygone era?
I guess I like the ones that everyone liked, like the Brady Bunch and Bewitched and I Dream a Genie, and
where the worst thing that could possibly happen was where your mother-in-law comes by and casts a spell on your cat.
That's right. And it was usually something fun. And you know what's very law of attraction, which is kind of coming to my mind now, like in Bewitched, like minute someone needed something, they would just call upon Dr. Bombay, come to me and heal me, come to me, and next thing you know, he was there.
He was there, boom, with a puff of smoke.
That's right. So that's why it's important to focus on what you want, because it comes to you.
You're claiming that Bewitched is actually a law of attraction show. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way until now, but yes. And actually, that's interesting, because I once watched an I Love Lucy. That's another one that I love. And in one of the episodes, they're trying to raise money to go to, I think it's England, somewhere abroad, and Ethel's being all negative about it. And Lucy says to her, Ethel, you have to hold a positive thought about it. Think positive. Then Ethel kind of thinks, she goes, oh, you mean I should think we will be able to go? And then Lucy's like, yes, there you go. That's how you should be thinking. And that one really was very law of attraction. Yeah, one of those writers involved definitely knew about it. And then, of course, as the show goes on, they do attract enough money to go. So
right.
There you go.
And it's one of those things that when we were growing up, we used to say, only on television.
Yeah. And what was the line that you read about kryptonite? That was also interesting.
Oh, from the Mike Dooley quote?
Yeah.
Right. He says, your feelings are like kryptonite. It's like he's trying to help you talk yourself into, putting up like a shield, so to speak, so that you're not influenced by other people's negativity or, condemning you for your crazy thoughts about law of attraction or whatever.
Right. I also think he means like your feelings are like kryptonite, so mind your feelings. You be in control of them instead of them being in control of you, because if you're not aware of that, then they can be like kryptonite and kind of blow up. And before you know it, you're lost in feeling upset about something or out of control about something. That also is part of law of attraction, is always being aware of how you're feeling. And if you need to raise how you're feeling, then in the moment, do something about it. Instead of setting yourself up for going to a lower vibration, set yourself up for success. And it can be as easy as thinking about something you enjoy doing. Like, some people like hiking, some people like painting, some people like traveling. traveling, it's always a good idea to focus on something you enjoy so that you deliberately keep yourself at a raised vibration, so you don't have to worry about that kryptonite.
I'm glad you said that, because as I was rereading that at your request, it occurred to me, kryptonite is what kills Superman.
That's right.
The last thing I want is my feelings to kill Superman.
That's right. Or yourself. That's what I think. Like, what I take from that quote is, like, you have to be very aware of your feelings so that they don't control you and you control them, because you want to control them from a higher place.
The other thing I like better than controlling them, although I understand what you're saying, I think what you're saying is valid, I like the idea of choosing them. And the reason that's important to me is back when I first discovered The Secret, even before that, I never really believed that I had control over my own feelings.
Yeah.
I thought that we were all fated to experience whatever feelings fate decides to hand to us through our experiences.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And it wasn't until after I read The Secret and then watched the movie The Secret and started exploring this and talking about it with my wife, my brother, my sister-in-law, other people, that I started to realize that what they were all leading up to was the idea that we can choose a different way to react to bad situations.
Totally, yeah.
And that was foreign to me. That was really foreign. I didn't believe that. It took me a while to even consider the idea. Mm-hmm. And then when I started to try to apply it, the first thing that happened was, well, how do you control your own feelings? I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know where the control knob was,
Yes.
It took a lot of time, a lot of practice, starting at a very low level, just experiencing nature and loving nature and so forth, that I finally began to realize, I can actually, in very subtle ways, begin to change the way I feel about them. Mm-hmm. And that's when I finally started to get the idea that no matter what situation is thrown at me, if I can pivot and find the other side of it and focus on that instead, it changes the way I feel about it. And in the long run, it changes the consequences that come out of that feeling. Because feelings have consequences, too.
Yes, and I love the pivot because it brings you from what you don't want to what you do want. And that's what it's about, is realizing you're focusing on something that you really don't want or the lack of something, and to be aware enough in the moment to realize that, and then ask yourself, like, okay, then what do I want regarding, whatever it was you're thinking about? And then getting lost in those thoughts instead of the other one.
Which, by the way, is the direct opposite of what the movies and the television shows and the news reports and the political debates want us to do. They don't want us to change our minds and say, look, I'm going to choose to focus on something else instead.
That's right.
They want us to focus on what they want us to focus on.
Yes, but it's so true what you said before, that unless you know about it, people do think that they're just a circumstance of, if something good happens, then they feel good. If something bad happens, then they feel bad. Like, it's just this flip-flopping of feeling good, feeling bad, feeling good, feeling bad. But it is totally in our control to stay more on a feeling good vibration than not.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with Sean Aker?
I'm not. Who's that?
Sean Aker is the author of a couple of books. The first book he put out was called The Happiness Advantage. Mm-hmm. Sean was an undergraduate and then a teaching assistant at Harvard University. And he was one of the first students in the relatively new Department of Positive Psychology at Harvard. Mm-hmm. And he wrote his book based largely on the research that he did while an undergraduate and what he learned about from his teachers, who were some of the leading authorities in the field of this brand new field of positive psychology. Because for years and years and years and years, psychology was all about abnormal psychology and negative side. And when things go wrong, how do you deal with it? The Freudian, the Jungian, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's only in the last 20 years or so they've been focusing on the positive side. Well, he was one of the first to do that. One of the main points he makes in his first book, The Happiness Advantage, is that we have a tendency as individuals and as a society to reverse the sequence of happiness and success. The popular belief is that if you succeed, you will be happy. Mm-hmm. But what all scientific research that the positive psychologists have done has shown that it's exactly the opposite.
Interesting.
When you're happy, you'll be successful. Happiness comes before success, not after.
And that's very law of attraction. That's very law of attraction.
It's very law of attraction. Interestingly enough, Sean Aker is totally uninterested in law of attraction or anything that's even slightly woo-woo. He's only interested in the pure science stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. There's plenty to learn from him, so I don't mind that part.
Yeah, but law of attraction to me is very scientific. Quantum physics, like energy attracts like energy.
I personally agree with you, but you talk to your typical quantum physicist and he'll disagree with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there is a certain leap of faith that you have to take in order to go from quantum physics to law of attraction. Mm-hmm. And that part, we can't honestly say that part is science. That part truly is a leap of faith.
But it's true that, like, I always tell my clients when talking about law of attraction, attraction is that we can't wait for the dream car or the dream house, whatever it is we want, and then get excited about it. We have to get excited about it first so that we attract it to it. And it's a little backwards than most people think.
It is. It's backward from the way I thought, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's taking me a long time to learn how to do it the other way around. I still stumble on it. But nevertheless, on those occasions when I've been able to pull off the change in my thinking, that's when cool stuff happens.
Yes, that's right. And plus you benefit from that more positive way of thinking, and you're putting yourself in a raised vibration.
It just plain feels better. It feels more relaxed.
Exactly.
It feels like there's less responsibility on my shoulders, which is very strange. I mean, I've always been a very responsibility-oriented person. And to remove that load is not only uplifting, it's uncomfortable. I can see that being one of the reasons why people would tend to resist.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to bearing the responsibility of carrying the world on their shoulders. No longer having to actually deal with that stuff and say, you know what, that's the universe's responsibility, not mine. Whoa, that's big stuff for somebody like me.
Right, because that's their go-to thought. And sometimes it's hard to shift your go-to thought to something else.
Right.
Because you've had so many years of practicing that particular way.
And the older we are, the harder it is, because we have built up more stuff, more junk in the subconscious mind that we're trying to overcome in that way. So it's a challenge.
That's a good quote. I like that.
So what's your first one? You have an Abraham Hicks quote for us. What do you got?
Yeah, well, there's so many good ones. You were born with a guidance system that lets you know how you feel. What thoughts give you life and support you? Feast on those thoughts. So to you, what does that mean?
Well, I can give you a long story that tells what that means to me.
Yeah.
I am a believer in alternative education, in alternatives to the traditional way of doing schooling. And the particular flavor of alternative education that I'm a supporter of is called the Sudbury model. Basically, it's a model where the kids have total control over what they do every day, which flies in the face of everything that traditional education teaches. But it actually works very well. And we can go into that sometime if you'd like to. But the key point that I want to bring up in that is that when you try to understand how it is that kids learn, you realize after you've been thinking about it for a while and do some reading about it and so forth, you realize that kids are born with what I call an internal magnet. And that if you just kind of let them go and just do what they're going to do from the very youngest age where they're crawling around right on up through their growing years, that magnet actually directs them to where they most need to learn at any given instant in time. And indeed, the Sudbury model teaches that if you just let kids go, at some point over the next 12 years of their life, they'll learn to read, they'll learn to write, they'll learn to do math, they'll learn to do all the basics that the traditional system wants you to learn, but they'll do it without being forced to sit in a chair and go through grades 1 through 6. And that is, obviously, it's very challenging to the traditional model of education, but it's one I've always believed in. So when I heard about this idea that we have a built-in pointer, a built-in compass, a built-in indicator, I said, well, yeah, I know all about that one. It made total sense to me. So that's what I heard when you read that.
But I also think you were born with the guidance system that lets you know how you feel, and I think that's just your emotion, because you can tell, just interpreting it simply. You can tell when you're feeling good, you can tell when you're feeling a little down, so you kind of have to know where you are on that guidance system.
I know that Abraham Hicks breaks it down to the emotions, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to give you a way to take control of your own thought processes, which is a great thing. I love that. I would take issue with one thing. The only thing I would take issue with is the idea the guidance system is just emotions, because it's not just. There's more going on, but emotions certainly play a crucial role in the whole process. I'm just saying that, for instance, one of the things that I mentioned the Sudbury model, one of the things that makes the Sudbury model so cool is that it allows kids to play and to socialize, which is, again, anathema in the traditional model. But in the Sudbury model, it works really, really well. And interestingly enough, tying into Sean Aker again, one of the things his research has discovered is that the persons who are most socially connected, usually these days through online social systems, Facebook, Twitter, and all that
today
stuff.
Would be different,
Yeah, but even over the years before there was the internet, the people who are the most socially connected, the indicators that science studying them have found is that they are the ones most likely to be successful. The ones who are least connected are least likely to be successful. You see what I mean? So when the Sudbury model was hitting on this idea of letting kids socialize, they weren't just throwing kids out to waste their time. This was critical to their development into full-fledged human adults. It flew against what the traditional educational system thought, but in terms of what they experienced, and it plays out. I mean, if you watch kids in a Sudbury model school interacting and you see what happens, it's just unbelievable, the learning that goes on through that socialization.
Wow.
Oh, you would be blown away to watch. You can actually see learning happening. You can actually see it just by watching kids in that kind of an environment where they're just free to explore what they want to explore. It's just fascinating to watch. Bringing it back to our conversation, that's why I say it's not just emotions. Socialization, the ability to socialize and communicate with others and build those relationships is key.
Yes, and then the quote goes on to say, what thoughts give you life, and feast on those thoughts.
That's what you're trying to do, isn't it?
Yeah, because when you do that, talking about keeping yourself at a high vibration, then you are. So like for you, Walt, what are thoughts that make you feel really good?
You know, when I was first exploring how to control my own thoughts and how to choose my own feelings and so forth, I didn't really know how to go about doing it. My wife gave me the clue to get me started. She said, because I like to walk every day. I have a regular 4 to 5 mile walk I do every day. So she says, well, when you're on your walk, why don't you just appreciate nature? You know, notice the flowers by the path. Notice the sun and the blue sky and the white clouds and the green trees and all that stuff. And so I did that. It took me a long time to actually do it because what I found in the initial stages is that because it was like a muscle I had never exercised, I was really bad at maintaining my focus. Literally, my focus could be distracted within seconds. It took a long time before I could really continue my focus and stay on how beautiful the sky was and how beautiful the flowers were and so forth for a minute. A minute was an eternity. I'm not kidding. It really, really was.
But that was good. That was some movement, right? That was still
movement. Yeah. It was fantastic movement. And I just kept at it and kept at it. Now, I started doing that about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And of course, today, it's real easy for me. I can walk out now on my walk on a gray day.
Right.
It's just gray, it's murky, it feels like it's going to rain at any moment. And if I'm really in my zone, I can put in my mind blue sky, white cloud day, and halfway through the walk, it'll turn into it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, I'll tell you a story along that line that happened very, very recently, like within the last 3 or 4 months, something like that. Exactly what I just described. I walked outside, started my walk. It was gray in all directions. It had been gray all day. And I was bound and determined to turn that weather around. So I walk a path. We have, where I live in Connecticut, we have old railroad tracks that have been turned into rails to trails paths. That's what I walk on.
Oh, nice.
Oh, really nice. Wonderful. Anybody who has one of those nearby knows how great they are. That's what I walk on. My typical walk is one where I go 2 miles down and 2 miles back. All the first 2 miles, I was focusing in my mind. I have time closing my eyes because I didn't want to be distracted by what reality was showing me, right? And just trying to imagine blue sky and clouds, sun and green trees and all the stuff that I love. I was just focusing as best I could. And I got to the end of that first half of the walk and I looked up and the sky was still gray. I said, oh well. And I turned around and all the sky behind me had turned blue.
Wow.
The entire way, this blue sky was following me as it was opening up. And I didn't know it until I turned around. So I walked back like in joy. Oh, wow, blue sky all the way back. And it was sun hitting on my forehead, and the trees were all lighting up. And it's like, wow, this is great. So just when I thought it wasn't working, I turned around and boom, there it was.
Why do you think it's important to feast on thoughts that give you a high vibration?
That's what the law of attraction teaches us, isn't it? You attract more of what it is that you focus on. So, like you were talking about, if we end up getting input from reality where we're on some sort of a negative thing, we will continue to come up with more negative thoughts to support it. And we'll keep attracting more and more negative stuff that comes into it. If you're going to break that pattern, you have to replace the thoughts with something positive. In the face of all that reality that's telling you that it's negative. You have to do it. Because if you don't, you just stay right there. So why do it? Well, that's why.
Yes, and when you feast on those wonderful thoughts, not only do you feel the nice result of that vibrationally, more come to you. You know, then you think, oh, that's right. Oh, and I like this, and I like that. Oh, that's right, and I like this, and I like that. And it just, the more you feast on positive thoughts, the more positive thoughts come in for you to feast on. It's just interesting how that works.
When new positive stuff comes in because you've been feasting on positive stuff, it's often positive stuff you didn't think about specifically. The vibration level is similar, but it's like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. I'm walking along and I'm thinking about blue sky and sun, but I didn't expect that, that deer to come running across my path. Wasn't that cool?
That's right. Now, what about this? What does this one mean to you? Because I like this one a lot. Feel excited about what's coming, even if you don't know what it is.
We never know what it is. I mean, it's not like any of us have totally perfectly refined our ability to attract things so that we're always attracting precisely the thing that we're thinking about. Because we get distracted. We all do. I must be perfectly honest. How many times have you been distracted today, do you think, David? I mean, for me, it's probably like 500 times. How about you?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. But I'm sure...
But you know what I mean. Because it's so easy for us to get distracted.
Yeah, and that's why I like this one so much, because we don't have to know what it is to put us in a statement of being excited. But if we are in a state of excitement, then you can be sure something is going to manifest that is exciting.
Yeah, and that's what makes the general approach so effective. Because when you're trying to attract something specific, not only are you limiting it, but if that one specific thing doesn't show up, you get disappointed. Whereas when you're putting out...
Yes, and then
that's
you go
right.
down.
Yeah, then all the vibration starts to fall, you start feeling depressed. It's like, well, none of this stuff even works. Yeah, right. But when you put out a general feeling and expect some sort of result that you don't really know what it is, first of all, it's a wonderful surprise when it happens. And second of all, it means you are no longer responsible for making individual things happen. It's taken a whole bunch of responsibility off yourself.
And when you feel excited about what's coming, if you feel excited about your future, if you feel excited about the day, whatever it is just is another way of keeping yourself deliberately at a raised vibration.
What's your favorite way to apply this every day? Do you have like a routine that you do?
I do. Like, I always wake up and I have a whole list of morning affirmations that I do every morning. And so I'm waking up and immediately putting myself in a raised vibration, which I really like doing. Plus, I'm setting myself up for those things to manifest.
Now, I got to ask you, when you first started, was it hard getting the habit going, or did you find it relatively easy?
It wasn't hard, but I didn't realize how powerful it was until I had gone away. When I was away, I think just because I was on vacation, I didn't do my morning affirmation. For some reason, I just associated them with doing them at home. I don't have to do them when I'm away. When I got back home, I thought to myself, I don't understand. I just don't feel that little vibrational boost that I'm used to feeling. What's going on? And then I thought to myself, I haven't been doing my morning affirmations. Like, could it really be from that? So I started them in again, and just within like a few days, I felt the difference, and I thought, wow, that really does make that much of a difference.
It's encouraging, really, because it shows precisely how we can establish new habits. Because that's what you described. You described the experience of a new habit that was now missing, and you missed it.
Yes, that's right. And ever since then, I've done them every morning.
You didn't miss after that.
I don't care if I have like a cold or if I'm not feeling great. I don't care. Every morning I recite or in my mind do my morning affirmations, and I just enjoy it. I feel the difference.
And I can honestly say I do affirmations too. I don't do them as consistently as I should. I do what we call the 3 gratitudes with my wife every night, which is another similar kind of exercise. So that's fairly consistent. I do my walking at least whenever the weather's good, and often when it's not.
And what is that exercise?
The exercise with 3 gratitudes? Oh, you've never done that one. That's actually a Sean Aker exercise. Basically, it's at the end of your day, you look back on the day and you look for at least 3 unique different things that happened that day that were good in some way, that you liked, that felt good, that maybe it was good for somebody else. It doesn't matter, but something that was part of your day that was positive. And the goal is to redirect your mind away from any of the negatives that are hanging over you that you might have been focusing on, and get yourself onto a positive spin before you go to sleep.
That's good.
It's really good.
Good for sure.
And Sean Aker, of course, he doesn't do any of the stuff from a law of attraction point of view. He just does it from pure science point of view. But from the pure science point of view, people who do that end up having more success, more love, more happiness, more money in their lives just by doing that exercise.
Wow. Okay. Now, what do you think about this one? This is a little different than the ones we talked about.
Okay.
Your desire to care about what others think is not serving you. What do you take?
Oh, I have a whole history with that. I mentioned politics as one of the 4 deadly sins of law of attraction. I've been a political animal most of my adult life. My own views are libertarian, which of course are very much outside the norm, but that didn't stop me from being political. And for years and years, I focused on all the worst sides of things that go on in life, and why is the government doing all this terrible stuff to us, and yada, 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 yada. And let me tell you, it's not a happy way to go. So the last thing I want to do now that I understand all this stuff, is to fall back into that pattern of worrying about how somebody else feels about politics. Because that's what the draw of politics is. Politics is about trying to force other people using government to accommodate something or to adopt a law or whatever it is. But it's all about this constant struggle going on between different peoples for a certain degree of political strength so that your view can be imposed on somebody else. It's the ultimate in being completely dependent upon what somebody else thinks. And the worst part is you can never change anybody else's mind. They can only change their own. So basically I was setting myself up constantly every single day to be defeated.
Wow. And then what about on a more personal level? You know, friends and family. Like, your desire to care about what others think is not serving you. Like,
I mean, that's not something I've had a whole lot that I had to deal with myself, but I've seen plenty of it. I mean, anybody who knows the word codependent knows exactly what that is. The idea that if you're in relationship of some kind with someone, whether it's a romantic relationship or a familial relationship or whatever it might be, maybe just a friend relationship, and one person is in some way trying to impose their beliefs, their way of doing things, their wishes, whatever it is on you, and you're buying into it, that is so incredibly damaging. I think that's what that quote means. I mean, does that match what you have in mind?
Yeah. Well, from this point of view, it's just, you know, why am I letting what you think affect my vibration?
The question isn't why do they do it. The question is, are you going to choose to do that?
Exactly. That's right.
There's an endless litany of reasons why people do it.
So that's what they're saying. Your desire to care about it is not serving you.
Because first of all, you can never win. You can never come out ahead doing that. It's impossible. I mean, if your entire life, let's say you are that kind of codependent person I was talking about, you know, that somebody who decides that they can only be happy when their spouse is happy. Well, first of all, I recommend you rethink it, but here's what your experience is going to be. Your experience is going to be that you will never be happy because there are no circumstances under which you can make your spouse happy. You can perhaps get them to laugh occasionally. You can perhaps, you know, feed them their favorite meal. You can perhaps, you know, shine their shoes and clean their clothes and, you know, fix their house and all that kind of stuff. But they will still never be happy, and neither will you, because that's not the way happiness works.
It's from
within. There is no happiness from without. There's only happiness from within. And the cool part of talking about the other side of that, the flip side is a healthy relationship. The cool part about a healthy relationship is that when you are in a healthy relationship, your happiness is coming from within you. The other person's happiness is coming from within them. And that combined energy creates amazing dynamics that produces all kinds of cool stuff.
Yes, I always say happiness is not circumstantial. It comes from within.
Yeah.
Like something can temporarily make you happy. Like, you know, if someone gives you a gift or you hear good news about something, that can make you temporarily happy, but we don't want to just be temporarily happy, right? We want to deliberately choose to be happy as much as possible.
The moment that you're saying that happiness is circumstantial is the moment that you're placing conditions for happiness.
Exactly.
Well, you can't do that.
Exactly.
The moment you place conditions for happiness is the moment you are guaranteed not to be happy. It's 100% certain, folks.
What about this one? Are you practicing appreciation or lack? What does that mean?
Oh, God, that one stumped me for the longest time because I didn't understand that lack was the opposite of have. I didn't understand it. See, most people think that, for instance, the opposite of black is white, the opposite of light is dark, and so on and so forth. They don't realize that the opposite of light is the lack of light. And in fact, many people would say, well, lack of light is dark. But they miss. The point is that there really is no such thing as dark. There is only lack of light. There really is no such thing as sadness, truly. There's only lack of happiness. And when you start understanding it that way, then you begin to realize that lack is truly the opposite of thing, whatever the thing is. And that becomes the basis for the Abraham Hicks metaphor about the two-ended stick, right?
All thoughts are really two thoughts?
Two ends of a stick. One end of the stick is the thing, the other end of the stick is the lack of the thing. Which end of the stick do you want to grab?
Yeah, that's right. But then are you practicing appreciation or loss? To me, that means within your own thoughts, like when you're thinking about things throughout your day. Like, are you practicing focusing on what you have, or are you practicing focusing on what you don't have?
Fortunately, it's not something you're limited to having to practice it within. And a great way to get going is to also practice it verbally with someone else. So that's why my wife and I, for instance, do our 3 gratitudes together at night, because it's so much easier. First of all, we're much less likely to skip it, because one of us will say, oh, we haven't done our 3 gratitudes yet. Oh, yeah, okay, we got to do that. So there's that. And then there's also the combined energy of, well, here's what I thought of. Oh, that made me think of this. Here's what I thought of. Oh, well, here's what I thought of, you know? So there's a great benefit also in expressing it with somebody else. You just have to make sure somebody else is on the kind of the same page with you, that they're trying to accomplish the same kind of goal.
It's also very powerful, though, just because we all, within ourselves, we all have our own, like, mind chatter, like, throughout the day, like, what, you know, we're thinking about different things. So I just love, like, what are you choosing to think about? We're always choosing to think about something, so are we choosing about how wonderful the things we have are already, or are we choosing to think about, gee, I wish I had more of this or more of that?
And most of the time, I think most of us are on the latter. I really do. And I say that because I look at what's going on in society, and it's evident that that's what's going on. You know, it's pretty clear.
Right. That's why I like this one, because it's a good reminder, like, what are we thinking about throughout the day? What are we focusing on? You know, does it need to be improved? It can all, you know, just become more aware. The more aware you become of what you're thinking about, then the more aware you can become of changing it if you need to improve.
And for those of us who are are work-oriented, who believe that work is a good thing and a healthy thing and that it's something that we should be doing in order to improve ourselves and get better lives and so forth, this is the ultimate work. The ultimate work is this internal dialogue and turning that internal dialogue around and doing that consistently throughout our day. I haven't yet gotten there to the point where my dialogue for the entire day internally is positive, but that's my goal. That's where I'm trying to aim to. And it's a battle sometimes.
It just takes practice.
It takes persistence. It takes okay, I failed 98% of the time, but I succeeded 2%. Let's go for 3.
It just takes practice. But you know what I found for myself is that the more you practice, though,
it does over time. It sometimes takes a while for that feeling to shift like that, where you begin to notice that it really did happen. But it does happen.
And it's also interesting because, and let me know if you've experienced this, a lot of these concepts, like you think you get it, like, okay, now I get, and then like 6 months later, like, oh, now I really get it. And like 6 months after that, you're like, oh, now I really get it. Stuff
starts to become more and more real as we practice them, because that, of course, is what law of attraction teaches us. We are creating our realities. And in the course of that happening, we start to believe more in what we say we believe in. You know, our experience starts to reinforce for us that, you know, this stuff really does work, that it is producing the kind of result that we're taught it's going to produce. And so as it becomes more and more reinforcing, it starts to seem more real. And in the process of seeming more real, of course, it becomes more real.
And you just kind of get it in deeper levels.
Yeah, sometimes we just it's because we explore it in different ways, you know. I mean, I talked earlier about exploring the idea of having that internal direction through, you know, the subway educational system. But you can easily do the same kind of thing with like a career path. You know, if you're on a career path, you can use that internal, what you want to call it, direction finder, compass, magnet, guidance system, whatever you want to call it. If you're true to how, you know, measuring how you feel, you know, taking a reading of how you feel about each step that you're taking as you're trying to find your ideal career path, and you react in the direction of things that feel good by pursuing more in that direction and staying away from stuff that doesn't feel good, that indicator, that direction finder will actually get you to a better career path. That much we do know. That's what the law of attraction teaches us. But what happens when you are on the career path and you make the mistakes? Because we all make the mistakes, right? And all of a sudden I find myself, you know, on a bad feeling. Well, now I'm in the bad feeling. It's like, oh, God, I got to rip myself away from this. I can get myself onto the good feeling. And I have that thought after I've been living in the bad feeling for about 30 minutes until I finally realized, wait a minute, what am I doing here in the bad feeling?
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, it's ongoing.
But with practice though, then you do it for like instead of 30 minutes, maybe you're in it for 20 minutes, and then maybe you're
we're looking for
10
incremental
minutes.
improvement. Yeah. That's
exactly.
We can't improve necessarily all at once. Well, maybe there is a tiny percentage of the population who can, but I've never found anybody who could. I don't know about you, but I never have.
No. Just
step by step, one little step at a time. Any improvement is improvement. And that, by the way, is the way you climb out of those negative spirals. By remembering that every little improvement is an improvement.
Absolutely. What about this one? Don't let yourself be knocked off your high flying.
That's what we're trying to do every day. And a lot of the time, I have to admit, I'm not on the high flying disc. I'm trying to figure out how to get back there.
But that's similar to what you were just saying, that like if you are on some form of a high-flying disc and then something happens that you're knocked off, we have to always do our best to slowly get back on. Like reaching for better thoughts. It starts with the noticing. Reaching for better thoughts.
It starts with noticing that you actually shifted, that you actually slipped. That's the first step. Before you can even make the shift, before you can make the pivot, you have to notice that you slipped. And it's so easy to not notice that. You know what I mean, right? I mean, it's really easy. You're just off on this negative spiral, and it's all perfectly logical and rational and reasonable. And wait a minute, everything's going wrong all of a sudden. I noticed it. Hooray! I noticed.
And then there's this ladder that brings you to your high flying disc, and every improved thought is like one step
that's the incremental
higher,
steps, right?
Up towards it. Yep. One step higher, one step higher. But yeah, the high flying disc is good to be
on.
on.
They are, because
sure.
the nice thing is it's like any kind of habit. If you have a habit, if you're on a high flying disc, it means your habitual pattern has become largely to the positive of what you want out of your life. And when that's like what an athlete calls being in the zone. It's what anybody calls just feeling good all the time. And when you're in that place, man, it just seems like everything works. Your focus is perfect. You're always on the right thing. Always more good stuff coming through. Yada yada. It's like whoa.
Yes, and you handle things in a better way, and
everything's so much easier.
Yep. Yep. So do you remember the last time you were on your high flying disc?
Not really, honestly. I mean, to me, if I answer that question, I'm trying to answer the question, when was I on a really high flying disc? And that's actually the wrong question from an incremental perspective. The correct question is, when was I on a higher flying disc than where I am right now? Because now it can be just a little bit higher, and it's still higher. And that's much more within reach. You see what I mean? So if I answer the question the way you asked it, I'm setting myself up for failure. But if I rephrase the question the way I asked it, now I'm setting myself up for success.
It's a good place to be, though, that's for sure.
And that's the point, really. The point is that even if you're not on the highest flying disc, if you're on a higher flying disc than you were, it feels good. It doesn't necessarily feel as good as you could possibly feel, but it still feels good. And that's the part to celebrate.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And sometimes, like the other night, I was talking to a client, and we were doing a process, and it just turned into this really funny situation. And she was laughing, I was laughing, and we were just like, oh my God, we're just both flying so high right now, and it just felt like so good, and like that was definitely a high flying disc moment. Well,
hey, all these shows are high flying discs for me. Joel and I talked about that a lot, and you're starting to see it too. I mean, every single time after you've done an hour of this kind of show, you feel so much better. I don't care what how low or how high you were before you started the show. You always feel better.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why this is my addiction. But this is what I'm addicted to.
Yes. And sometimes even in my mind, I'm just keep choosing to be on your high flying disc. Just even if I'm not feeling like I am, I just remind myself just keep choosing to.
I just say higher flying disc, but it's basically the same concept.
Yeah, I want to head in that direction.
I'm looking up there. That's where I'm headed. This is going to be great.
Yes. What about this one? Get yourself to a place of non-resistance.
Non-resistance. Now, there's a concept right there. That was another one that took me a long time. Because the first time I heard about the concept of resistance, I first had to ask myself, well, am I resisting? Because that was a new thought. And the answer I came to myself was, I don't know how I'm resisting. Where's the off switch on my resistance? I can't find. I don't have an off switch. What are you talking about resistance? It took a long time to come to terms with what that whole concept of resistance was. Over time, I began to notice it in little dribs and drabs. Notice it in ways that I had never really pieced together my resistance. I never really consciously recognized it as a whole. And so I had to look at it in little pieces over time. I noticed that here's an example of it here, here's an example of it there. And over time, I began to realize, oh, yeah, there is some resistance going on there. Where's that coming from? I don't know where that's coming from. How do I turn that off? That's what I want to learn. I want to learn to turn that off.
Yes, well, I like to explain resistance as just kind of imagine there's this invisible wall in front of you, and everything you want.
Well, when you're in a negative vortex, you don't have to imagine that wall. It's in front of you every single moment of the day.
And that wall, but what makes up that resistance is the fear, the worry, the doubt, the how, the when, and all that.
That's the harder part to make the connection on, because we're experiencing the outside influences that are hitting us the wrong way. But making the connection to what we're feeling inside and recognizing that that's the resistance, that's the hard part.
And every time, the good thing though is every time you do that pivot and focus on what you want instead of what you don't want, you're kind of taking a hammer to the wall of resistance.
Oh yeah, well it's
you know, every time you deliberately raise yourself vibrationally, you're
actually for
knocking
me
down
that's too
resistance.
violent a metaphor. For me, it's that you're melting it. It's just it's
Or
dripping.
melting
It's just
at that
dripping
time, too,
away.
yeah.
You know.
Yes. And the least resistance we have, the more we allow in, the
Yes.
more we manifest.
Exactly true.
That's resistance is a big one to kind
It takes a while.
get,
It really does take a
understand.
while.
And then realize like, oh, okay, I don't want to be in resistance, so let me reach for a better thought. Let me think about something I enjoy. Let me think about what I want.
It also
instead of
takes a
what I
while
don't
to
want.
believe that changing your thought is actually going to change the resistance level.
Yes, but you can feel it though. Like when you raise yourself even a little bit vibrationally.
Well, that's the key
what you
is
did.
recognizing that shift.
You know?
A lot of people, I've run into this with a lot of people who I've shared the concept with. If you propose to them the idea that they're resisting and that they need to release that resistance, they will spend the next hour focusing on the resistance. It's very hard for them to see the improvement in feeling because they're so focused on that resistance.
Yes, and the big one is the how. Like a lot of people say, well, I want to attract this, and then you kind of explain law of attraction, but then they're like, but how's that going to happen? And I'm like, but that's the whole thing. That's not what you're going to get involved in, because the minute you go into the how,
Mike
there's
Dooley
that
calls them
resistance.
the horrible hows. Because that's what they are. They're horrible.
Yes.
It's a losing track. There's no way you can win on that track. Trying to figure out how it's going to work.
Yep, the hows and the whens. The hows
And
and the whens.
one of the
One
of the lessons that I learned along the way, as I was trying to understand and experience and figure out how all this stuff worked, was one that happened when Louise and I moved back to Connecticut. We were originally from New England. We moved to Virginia to help my parents at a time when they needed to move into a senior housing center, and they didn't have really the ability to do it all themselves. And then we stayed there for a total of 11 years, and then Louise said, I want to move back. So we moved back. Long story short, when we moved back, by the time we got here, we had no vehicles. There's a whole story involved in that. I'll tell you that story sometime. But we had no vehicles of our own. We were in a rental car, and of course, those are expensive, you know. And so we had to go get cars. Well, to add to it, we used all our savings in order to make the move. So we had no money to buy a car.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, so we go to the car dealership and we say, you know, we have no money to buy a car. But we need a car. In fact, we need two of them. And we had no idea how to make this happen. And so that's what we literally did. We said, we don't know how to do this, so we're going to stop figuring about how. Because there's just no way for us to solve this problem. And you know what the remarkable thing was? We both drove out of the dealership that day with brand new cars.
Wow.
And that was theoretically impossible.
That's right.
But it happened.
That's right.
It happened. And I'll tell you, that
That's
dealership,
right.
they bent over backwards to make it happen. They had to break their own rules to make it happen. But they did.
That's right. That's right.
So
the power of intention.
the fact
right?
I walked away from that and I said, there was absolutely no way I could have mapped out that how. Because the story actually has much more twists and turns than what I just told. It has some really bizarre twists and turns. And if I had to sit back and I say to myself, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to drive up to the dealership. We're going to go in and we're going to say we can't afford anything. And then this is going to happen, followed by this and this and this. And then this wacky thing is going to happen, followed by this. And then all of a sudden they're going to say, well, we're going to give you brand new cars. Hollywood couldn't have mapped that one out.
That's right. That's why it's so, and it feels better not to get caught
It
up in
does.
the how. It just feels lighter. It feels better. It's like we don't have to know how something's going to manifest.
That was actually one of the things.
Just get excited about it.
Absolutely. That was one of the things that I most needed to release resistance on. I needed to let go of the idea that it couldn't feel better if I didn't make it happen. You know that one? Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first instances where I didn't make it happen. And it did feel better, and it felt weird.
Yep.
Because I wasn't manipulating things to make it happen. And it happened anyway.
Right. Right. That's right. Because we're like basically taught our whole lives, like, you know, you have to be concerned with the how and the when. Like, what do you mean don't be concerned with the how and the when? I'm like, no, don't be concerned with the how and the when.
Especially if you happen to be, like I was, a child of Depression-era parents. You know, how are you going to afford that? How are you going to pay for that? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's why a lot of people, unfortunately, have so much resistance about money. A lot of that has to do with, you know, what kind of home they came from and how their parents thought about money, and they just kind of took on the same way of thinking.
It gets passed along generationally.
That's right.
It does.
That's right. Like, well, how am I going to attract more money? I'm like, you don't have to know. Just raise your vibration about money and let it happen.
The good part is that as you try it for the first time and experience that it really does work, it kind of gives you permission to try it again. You know what I mean? It gives you like, okay, well, it did work that one time, so I'm going to forget about it for a week, but a week later, you know what, it did work. Maybe I'll try it again with this other scenario, you know?
That's right.
And over time, you're hooked. But yeah, you're hooked over time.
All those questions are just holding you back from manifesting what you want.
That process of being hooked that way, a little bit at a time, it starts to reel you in over time. And pretty soon you find yourself, you find that you're into woo-woo land. Like, wait a minute, I was never a woo-woo person. What's going on here? Now I probably say I'm into woo-woo, but 5 years ago I would have said, yeah, right.
But when you start seeing and experiencing the results, then you're like, oh, there must be something to this. It seems
That's right.
Seems to work.
And it's actually in a lot of different ways. It's not just acquiring things. Things are only a small piece of the overall puzzle, really. You know?
I agree. I agree.
One of the things, if you can call it a thing, that I've acquired over the last 5, 6, 7 years is a better knowledge of spirit, which really is not a thing at all. I mean, it kind of is. We describe it as a thing because that's the way our language works, but it really isn't. It's energy, you know?
Yeah.
And having an understanding of how spirit works energetically puts me way ahead of where I was 10 years ago. You know? It also puts me outside of conversations from many people, but you learn not to talk about the Great Pumpkin too much, you know?
Well, yeah, you got to be careful who you share what with, because if someone's not ready yet or doesn't get certain things yet,
they're going to drag you down into their negative vortex, which you don't want to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have to be selective about it. But it is cool though to learn stuff along that line. I'll tell you one cool story that happened. I first experienced and read about The Secret, as I think I told you last week, in 2007, a year after it came out. My father passed in March 2008. And I won't tell all that story. I'll tell one little piece of it. He died from complications due to Parkinson's. And Parkinson's disease is where essentially your dopamine production levels keep decreasing and decreasing and decreasing, and you have all of the shakes and all that kind of stuff. And it's really it leads to a very horrible death. I won't go into the details, but just trust me, it's a very horrible death in terms of it's not painful. It's not like murder or something like that. But it's just not a nice thing. So anyway, what I've learned since then is that through our thoughts and our focusing on our feelings, I believe we can actually reverse Parkinson's, because what we really need to do is increase dopamine levels. And what science has taught us, you increase dopamine levels whenever you laugh, whenever you feel good, whenever you choose positive thoughts. Like, oh, well, okay, there's the solution.
Right.
I didn't know how to teach that to my dad at the time, but nevertheless. So I couldn't fix my dad, right? And that was depressing. And yet when he passed, it was like, thank goodness he's passed all that good. Interesting thing happened. My sister has often described herself as being mildly psychic. And she's taking classes and how to develop your psychic abilities and all that. And I always kind of poo-pooed it and shook my head like, yeah, okay, rolled my eyes. Well, within, I think it was 3 or 4 days after my dad's passing, my sister calls me up and says, I just had something really weird happen. My mom and I went to church. There was a church that my dad and my mom went to because we wanted to be there for the Sunday after he had passed. And while we were in the service, I started to experience a massive headache, she said, to the point where it was like migraine levels. It was a really severe headache. Well, her psychic classes had told her that if that happens kind of out of the blue, it can mean that someone's trying to connect with you from the other side. So she immediately thought, I wonder if it could be Dad. So she said, Dad, is that you? And she waited a moment and got a message back that said, yes. Now, already we're moving away because a lot of people are saying, yeah, okay, so now you're talking to the dead. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, fine. But my sister believed it. And so my sister actually did something very smart at that point. She marshaled her thoughts of the moment and asked the question that she most wanted to know the answer to, which was, what's it like on the other side? And the answer that came back was festive. Now, that's an interesting answer.
That's good.
It's an interesting answer for two reasons. One, because it sounds good. And two, because festive is what I call a dad word. And I call it that because my sister would never use the word festive. It's not part of her vocabulary, but it's very much part of my dad's vocabulary. So that, for me, was validation. She was actually getting something from my dad.
Wow, that's interesting. I like that story.
So,
because that word especially.
So in one fell swoop, I got validation that my dad was okay. Yeah, he had passed on. He was no longer in physical form, but he was fine. And we all got. There's more to the story, but we all got messages like this that basically set my whole family into a mood of saying, "Oh, good, this is fine." Well, next came the memorial service. We didn't do a funeral; we did a memorial service. So no caskets or anything like that. Just celebrating the passing of the life, and who the wonderful person was, and so forth. And we went to the same church. Now, I'm not a churchgoer, and my brother isn't either. But we went to the same church where my parents worshipped for this memorial service, and my family and I found ourselves in this main room near their sanctuary with the minister, the head minister of the place, and we're talking, and I'm realizing why we're there. We were deliberately in this room so that he could comfort us in our hour of loss, and I just started to smile because I knew that every single member of my family needed no comforting at that point. It was the jarring disreality of it was just amazing. And it took the minister about 20 minutes before he finally realized he wasn't needed. It was so surreal to him that when he gave his sermon after, he didn't call it a sermon, his talk, I can't remember what they call it, but he gave his talk about my dad during the service. He was talking about the tremendous level of faith that our family had. He was just so impressed with how high our level of faith was. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's funny because I don't even go to church. And here I am being told by a minister I have this very high level of faith. To me, it wasn't faith. To me, it was knowledge. I had direct knowledge that told me Dad was fine. But he saw it as faith. And that's when it first struck me that what I was really into here was the metaphysical spiritual realm in a way that I had never been there before. I had always kind of rejected all that as nonsense. Well, now I was smack dab in the middle of it. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. That's a good realization for sure.
So,
very interesting. Well, I can't believe
Believe it or not, we're actually over. So I'm going to have to do some editing to cut some of this stuff out. But David, it's been wonderful again. See, this is what happens every week. We get wrapped up in this stuff, and when we're all done, it's like, wow, where did the time go? Yes.
I just want to say if anybody wants to find out more about me, they can go to lifecoachdavid.com, and they can find out more about me and some books I've written.
That sounds great. And, of course, they can always subscribe to our podcast at loatoday.net. They can always find us here right here on PRN, where we're broadcast every week. And you can also find us on YouTube, on Facebook, and we're even in the Apple iTunes store. So there's lots of places to find us. Dave, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Same here. I really enjoyed it.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.